there's a board of state directors here that helps put this on, so I want to thank the fellow board members for doing most of this, because I'm William Sands, Dr. Bill Sands, who's a sports scientist, biomechanist, and former professor and all-around oracle in the field of physiology and biomechanics. He has over 40 years of experience with Olympic sports. He's written 11 books, more than 25 book chapters, and has published more than 300 articles on sports performance. He is currently serving as the sport technologist for the U.S. Ski and Snowboard Association in Park City, Utah, and recently served as the National Director of Education for the NSCA in Colorado Springs. He's also been a university professor, coordinator of human performance laboratories, and directed research for the U.S. Ski and Snowboard Association, USA Gymnastics, and the U.S. Olympic Committee. He's also a fellow of the American College of Sports Medicine, a former All-American gymnast, and a World Championship gymnastics coach. For any of you that have had an opportunity to correspond with Dr. Sands via email, you will notice a very unique signature line on the bottom of his emails, and I thought it was very fitting as a philosophy of life, but also a very good description of the man himself. It is a line from an old Apple computer commercial, and it goes, "Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify them, or vilify them, but the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward, and while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who do." Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Bill Sands.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. Okay, my task is to explain monitoring, and I'll have to hustle because I have a fair amount of material. So I recently I was invited to go to Doha in Qatar to do a presentation on monitoring, and I could be lazy and just do the same presentation here, but I'm tired of doing that one. I've done it so many times. So I decided to take a little different tack. However, if you go to the website at Aspire, where their National Sports Center is, you can see all of the presentations on video from that conference. It's probably the best conference I've attended in ages. And so I would really encourage you to go and listen. Carl Foster was the keynote speaker, and of course he's the guy that sort of invented session RPE, and he is quite the authority on monitoring. So anyway, rather than redo that presentation for you, I would just invite you to go and watch the video. Okay. All right, I got interested in monitoring when I was a coach back in the Cretaceous period, when the Earth was still cooling. I did a lot of monitoring. I even started in high school comparing or relating barometric pressure to the quality of my workouts. It was an interesting process. Didn't really yield much, but it was something I could measure. So, because it came on the news. If you look here, this is at that time, 9-year-old little gymnast who ultimately won a bronze medal in Seoul. This is the sleep records of a 1980 Olympian. This is data from the University of Utah gymnastics team. This is when I was interested in injury, so I begged the Federation for the injury records from their insurance company, and found that there's a peak in injuries in January of each year. And so I thought, well, that would mean that I probably should be extra vigilant during that particular time. And I've learned many other things. So that was me. I'm going to talk about three things, kind of interacting or interrelated things. The first one is why monitor at all, right? Because not everybody does, and they often think they have good reasons. Okay. The second thing is what's worth monitoring, and I'm going to blend that together with how do you convert what's worth monitoring into something that's meaningful. Because you can collect data till you're blue in the face, and as I learned at Doha, is that with all the presentations that they did, probably the single biggest message was that they didn't know what the hell was being said in their data. And most of them freely admitted it. There was a lot of information that they had, gorgeous charts and all that kind of stuff, but they were pretty paralyzed with being able to make sense of it. So there were a couple who were much better than others, but by and large they didn't do real well.
Our government failed to connect the dots in a way that would have prevented a known terrorist from boarding a plane.
Okay, connecting the dots, that's an important phrase that's in the modern lexicon. And connecting the dots is something I'm going to try and emphasize.
The first story is about connecting the dots.
Okay, Steve Jobs talked about connecting the dots. So he said you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. And you have to have good dots to connect them in order to make any sense out of them. So you have to collect quality information on your athletes in order to be able to use monitoring for any beneficial effect. So why do coaches and athletes tend to resist this idea? Because they do. I've done probably hundreds of presentations on monitoring, and when I finish, I ask, well, how many of you now are going to go out and start doing monitoring? And rarely does anyone raise their hand, because it's a lot of work. And although they're kind of mesmerized by the data I can show them, when they start thinking about implementing it in their own programs, they balk. Okay, so I'm going to try and continue to encourage you to do that. And probably the reason that most people don't do it is that they are so smart, they don't need feedback from anybody else. Okay, well, you're all observers, right? We want to do evidence-based coaching, and it does require ongoing assessment to do evidence-based coaching. Evidence-based coaching, we're stealing from evidence-based medicine, right? Same idea, but different environment. And coaches are in the best position to know the most about their athletes. I don't disagree with that. Okay, but information is fragile. It's often hidden. You often miss it. Oftentimes you don't know what the heck to look for. Oftentimes the athletes are pretty stoic and they don't tell you what to look for. And so what can we do about that? Well, I want to show you something that hopefully will help you understand this idea. So this is a little exercise. Count the number of F's in that sentence. Okay, got them? Okay, how many are there? 6. Okay, we got 6. Oops. How many? How many saw 3? Okay, how many saw 4? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Now you gotta stay with me here, because you can count those as all kind of opinions, right? Of how many things they saw. Lots of people have opinions, but unless you have the data in front of you, there's little agreement, and everybody has an opinion, and they're kind of all equally valid because you don't have any data to compare it to. Well, there were 6. Okay, now that we have the data, you can see it. Without the data, you can make up all kinds of crap. You know, as we see in the current political campaigns. All right, for this next one, if you have already seen this, please don't spill the beans. I've got to switch this. Okay. Whoops, went backwards. Uh-oh. It may not play. We'll see. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So this is a selective attention test. Count how many times the players in white pass the ball. That's all there is to it. Okay, so players in white, count how many times they pass the ball. Watch them close. Okay, how many passes did you count? 13? 12? 12? How many? Anyone 10? 11? 12? 13? 14? 15? 16? 15? Somebody have 15? You have 15? Okay. I'm going to play it again. This time, don't bother watching the passes. The correct answer actually is 15. But don't bother watching the passes. Just look at the whole scene and tell me how blind you are. Please notice we have a new actor on the screen. How many of you didn't see the gorilla walk through the scene? So all I'm trying to demonstrate is that your perception is fragile. Okay? And we can distort it by biasing it to look for something specific. Everyone is a prisoner of their paradigm. If you ask a nutritionist what's wrong with the athlete, inevitably they'll come up with some nutrition thing. If they just ate X, they'd win all the medals. Okay, something I learned after a number of years at the USOC is that there's no athlete problem that lies in only one academic area, ever. Okay, you need a nutritionist, you need a physician, you need a physiologist, you need a biomechanist, you need all kinds of people. A strategist, perhaps. And so, don't get too cocky about the idea that you think coaches know everything, because oftentimes they don't. Okay, what's worth monitoring? Hopkins wrote a couple of papers on this. What do you really want to know? Do you want to, if you're just dealing with young kids, maybe all you're interested in is satisfaction. Are they satisfied with having fun? Or, that may be your only interest. Are you interested in just taking an accounting, like how many of X did they do? Which is what most strength coaches do, right? Because you just keep track of dosage. Very rarely do you keep track of response. So, is it just competition results? That's handy because every coach has it. So you can certainly monitor competition results. Those are easy. You should be monitoring dose response. And in my view, if you're not monitoring dose and response, you're not really monitoring. Okay, if you're just keeping track of what they do, you're accounting. If you're just keeping track of the response, then you're either a sports psycho or a physician, right? So practical monitoring, oftentimes you're going to find, and I'll show you, that the data are often in the noise. Oftentimes you miss it because, like the gorilla, that would be considered perceptual noise when you're trying to figure out how many times the ball was passed. Almost all the time it's idiographic versus nomothetic, which is big words that mean single subjects versus group studies, okay? And you're trying to look for anomalies by and large. If everything's going along hunky-dory, you don't have to do much. What you're looking for is the ones that are not going hunky-dory. And you're looking for departures from stability. There have been a gazillion attempts to find individual markers for understanding training, and it's been going on for at least 50 years. You'd think by now we would have found this magic marker if it existed. But I swear, if a Martian came down and looked at this and said, "What are you looking for?" And we said, "Oh, we're looking for markers of training." And he'd go, "No intelligent life here, let's go home." And so I'm going to tell you that this search for a marker is futile, because it's a constellation of markers that you have to watch, not just one. Okay? So coaches and physicians have the same covenant. A physician is responsible for healing a specific patient. Oftentimes you are responsible for enhancing the preparedness of a specific athlete. It's very difficult to measure that stuff in group data, right? And many times it's worthless. I'll give you an example. I do a study with 20 athletes in it on my team. I don't have a control group because they're elite athletes and there isn't a control group, right? So we do a study of the 20 athletes. I do some pre-test. I implement a treatment of some kind, some training program, and then I do a post-test. Get statistical significance, by and large, the team average improved, that sort of thing. Now I can go on the lecture circuit and publish my results and go to Hollywood and get a drug habit, rehab, drug habit, rehab, drug habit, rehab, and then be famous, right? But if you look closer at the study, you'd find out that 18 of the athletes got better, but 2 athletes actually got a little worse. And the two athletes that got a little worse, and you could still get statistical significance that way, right? Statisticians? Yeah, you can. So the two athletes that got a little worse are your best hopes for a medal. The non-potential medalists are the ones that got better. The potential medalists actually got worse. So as coaches, was that a successful treatment? Was that a successful program? Survey says, no, it wasn't, right? Yet you could reach statistical significance. So I'm telling you, you've got to rethink, studying studies and that sort of stuff, because unless you can see what happened to individuals, you're pretty much hamstrung on whether or not programs actually work. So I want to talk about a little bit of this information that was being done in the 50s, where I'm going to argue that what happens with athletes is characteristic but idiosyncratic. That means that when I stress someone, they will respond in a characteristic way, regardless of the stress. Sully, you talked about that, right? But they will also be idiosyncratic, where you might respond to stress by perspiration. You might respond to stress by overeating. You might respond to stress by fasting. Someone else might respond to stress by sleep disturbances. Do you follow? What I've learned after 25 years of monitoring is that athletes tend to be or respond to stress in characteristic but idiosyncratic ways. Okay, so here's an example from gymnastics. We could use the dose-response idea and take gymnastics and talk about dosage in terms of number of elements and elements per minute for intensity. We could look at response variables in terms of heart rate, scale weight, sleep duration, illnesses, injuries, mood states, all those kinds of things, right? So simple enough, I was getting dose and response for my sport, which was gymnastics. Okay, characteristic but idiosyncratic. Here's a gymnast from the University of Utah who shows decreasing weight, decreasing resting heart rate, then followed by increasing resting heart rate. What's that the symptom of? Overtraining, right, is a classic symptom of overtraining. So, and this was her last practice of her life because she dislocated her elbow. Okay. What's interesting is that at the same time she's showing that she's sick, she's fatigued, she's not cheerful, and so, is that not a constellation of symptoms that should cause you to, put up a warning? Absolutely. Did we? Yes. I was an assistant coach at the time in graduate school. Was the coach informed? Yes. Did he do anything about it? No. At the time, we didn't know what to do, frankly. She's not really doing what you would expect, but what else do you do? And it was, like all coaches, very reluctant to release them from training. Okay, here's a different athlete, same team. In this case, we're looking at sleep disturbances. And here is the preseason, Christmas break, and the competitive season. You can see the number and severity of sleep disturbances increases during the competitive period. Does that mean she's sick? Does she have a sleep disorder? Well, the answer is no, because if she did, she'd have it over here too. Right? But she doesn't. It only comes up here. It shows she's not coping well, right? And she went from a 4-event anticipated competitor at nationals to 2. Right? She just did okay, but she had to be drawn back from what she was planning to do in competition. Okay. Uh-oh, I touched something I shouldn't have. Okay, this is same team, different athlete. And this one expresses her frustrations or her dealing with stress by feeling helpless and increasing nervousness just before NCAA nationals, which are right here. Okay, so 3 different athletes, 3 different expressions of stress, but they characteristically do the same expression. But it's idiosyncratic. Each athlete is slightly different. Therefore, I would argue that the search for a single marker of stress is a waste of your time. The only one I can possibly lean on, because it's kind of a conglomeration of all those things, is session RPE. If you can only monitor one thing, session RPE is the way to go. Okay. Now, there are 3 things I want to talk about as far as monitoring goes. The first one is kind of a brute force approach, and it involves my initial work on monitoring back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. Okay? It includes graphic analysis and some artificial intelligence applications. So, first, we would monitor by taking information from athletes and importing it directly to the computer. where there was a computer in the gym and they would tap their stuff in. I studied it, so they had to be able to enter all their data in less than a minute. Okay? Otherwise, I had to pare down the questions and make it easier. Okay? So after doing that, I found out that there was often a line of people waiting to get to the computer, and that was not okay. So then I turned to designing a dot sheet so that everyone could fill out their own dot sheet. And then I had to write a lot of analysis software in the neighborhood of hundreds of iterations and variations on software to get the information out that I want. Okay, so here's an example of the dot sheet. It has an ID, the date, day of the week, their scale weight, mood states, resting heart rate, time to bed, time awake, sleep disturbances, mood state on a Likert-like scale. Injuries, these are unilateral, these are bilateral. Just tell me what body part's injured. And then this is dosage. This is response. This is dosage, where they just recorded the number of elements. They would go, number of elements, handstand forward roll, 1, 2. Do you follow? When they got to 5, they put a slash through it. That's all they did, carried an index card. Okay. Then they would enter that into the computer before they went home. So other examples, this is men's gymnastics. This is weight training at the University of Utah. This was taking place before the internet, before smartphones and apps and all that kind of stuff, so we were kind of stuck with that. There was a world actually existed before the internet, in case you were wondering. Okay? So here are just examples of it. This is me. Hey, hello. There we go. This is me running, scanning dot sheets. This is a gymnast entering stuff directly into the computer, both at the University of Utah. Okay. All right. So what do you do with it, though? Okay. So what I did is basically what many other people in the world have done, is to take the data and then apply rules to it. Okay. So in this case, response is shown here. Or this is dosage. Dadgummit. Switches are too close together, and I got fat thumb disease. Okay. So this is volume and intensity. This is the last 7 days, I think. The next 7 days, and then all the way back to the beginning of the data collection. That serves for this as well. For response variables, I found that the last 10 training days is really all I needed to know, just from experience. In Doha, I found out that the Australians are using chronic load and acute load. And they use it for everything, pretty much. Where the chronic load is the running average over a month. And the acute load is the running average over a week. And they compare the two to see if things are going wacko. Okay? And it seems to work pretty well. I would still describe that as a brute force approach. Right? There's no damn reason why that should work. You know, there's no theoretical underpinnings for that. So it was just found by experience, and people chugged away, just like me. So the coaches would get this. Okay? And did the video play? Did the video play? No? I was too busy. So here I'm explaining, this is dosage. I'm talking to a TV reporter, and here I'm scanning stuff. And then I think I go through the profile of an athlete here and talk about this athlete is in trouble. They're showing higher levels of fatigue than they should. And so, in theory, this athlete should be brought back a little bit because they're probably going to be subject to overtraining. Okay. So my point is that not only is it theoretical, I actually did it. And so we're not just being academic. This is from the expert system. I wrote an expert system in Prolog with over 200 Prolog rules, such as if heart rate is increasing by a certain amount over a certain number of days, and weight is decreasing by a certain amount over a certain number of days, that's an indicator of overtraining. Keep that in mind. Then I would look for other symptoms. Do you follow? Has training load been increased stupidly? And that sort of thing. And those are all put together by Prolog rules, if-then type rules. Okay? And then it's a little hard to see, but this is what the coach got, but only about a third of the page. I tried to get everything down to one page. And then in English, it just tells them, heart rate's okay, average weight's okay, but their psychological state is declining and their average health is declining. And so those would be flagged as potential issues to be addressed. It doesn't diagnose anything, it encourages the coach to do more investigation. Are you with me? Okay. All right. We also looked at injury trends. And I have to admit that as much as I don't like doing group stuff for monitoring, I had to do group stuff in order to get the stuff published. Because none of you little boogers have ever been trained in single subject design research, even though that preceded regular statistical analysis by 100 years. Okay? So, but no one who's a reviewer for a journal knows what in the hell I'm talking about. And so therefore they reject it, because it can't possibly be science unless they know what it is. Anyway, I want to show you some 5 years of injury data from the University of Utah. This shows them when they arrive in the summer. There's a lot of niggly little injuries that happen during this conditioning period. Skill development, it sort of stabilizes, kind of stabilizes there. When they start routine development and routine performance, then injuries go way up high, because that's a pretty demanding period. Okay, they crash and burn a lot, and it's a tough time for development of a gymnast. Then if you go over to the competitive period, these are new injuries, so they come here and this is just getting back in shape from Christmas break. And then if you count the number of peaks, you'd find that there are 10, and there are 10 competitions. Da-da-da-dum. Would you have known that without the data? No one did. Okay, it seems like somebody would have kept track, but no one did. Okay, these are all injuries. So whether you get a new injury, it's recorded on that day, and then we just kind of leave it alone. Then if you get an injury but it's sustained for a while, what we find with gymnasts is that once they're hurt forever. They never really heal or rehab completely. Okay, until nationals, when if they've been good with their therapy, then they go for surgery, and we take the 7 survivors or 10 survivors to NCAAs, and then after that we take the non-survivors to surgery. Okay, here's another look. This time I'm monitoring strength. I'm using a Nicholas manual muscle tester, which is shown right here. It's just a little thing you hold in your hand, costs about $1,000 now, it wasn't that expensive then, that you push with, and then it has a load cell in it, so it gives you the force in kilograms force, with a stupid unit. But so what I do is I put the knee in 30 degrees, 30 degrees of flexion. Oh, crap. Now what? Is that going to take me back where I need to go? Oh, thank you. Okay. Again, fat thumb disease. When I grew up, there were 3 buttons on a television, not 50. So, and they were spaced well apart. So, let's see, I was talking about 30 degrees of flexion. Then I put the thing on there and I'd say, do not let me bend your knee. And then I start pushing like a maniac while they resist it. And when I break the position, I look, oh, so many kilos of force, right? And I write it down. 3 trials, and we did it every week for 1 academic year. And these are the results. Okay, if I look at strength, there's this decelerating acquisition of strength in the early part of the season. Then there's a collapse of strength during routine development and routine performance. This I could explain, but it would be an hour. Then this is a typical Selye curve, right? A decay of fitness followed by recovery and supercompensation. Hello? Okay, you'll see that better in a minute. Then all the way through their competition, and their strength is pretty close to a peak right before NCAA nationals. The weird part is the big peak is after nationals. Why would that be? It's that ugly 4-letter word, rest. Okay, so we let them rest, and then they do better. So, but that's not the whole story. Okay, this is just to show the patterns. That's not the whole story. Hello. Oh, there it is. We also, gymnasts have to be on the lean side of lean. And so we kept track of their skin fold sums using 4 skin fold sites that have been noted to reflect change in body composition. I tried not to give them skin fold sites so that they could calculate their percent fat, because girls are freaky and do weird stuff with that information. Okay, so then this is something I have a pet peeve, which is why I put the slide in. People say, oh, you don't need to collect body composition data more frequently than once a month, right? Because it doesn't change that fast. Bull. If you ever bothered to collect it, you'd find out that it changes a lot faster than once a month. Okay, because this is weekly skin folds. This is scale weight. Scale weight even changes a fair amount if you've got a team that is an aesthetic sport and needs control of weight. So I'm sure that all of the female athlete triad people are now collapsing in agony because I collected body composition data weekly, because there's something wrong with that. Ignorance is the answer there. Okay, onward. Okay, so this is our strength data expressed per millimeter skin fold. Now we see that same curve. We see the cell-E dip with fatigue. Then we see an increase in strength, a little noisy, but the peak occurs just before NCAA Nationals. Would that indicate that we did our job? Sounds like it, right? And they did. They did. They went to Nationals, and they placed second, and they were beaten by a better team. They hit all 24 routines. They did an absolutely fabulous job. Somebody else did a little more fabulous job. Okay? So, do you feel bad because you came in second? You did everything you could possibly do. Do you follow? So, somebody else had a better plan. This thing, there we go. Okay. That was brute force, using rules and graphical analysis and things like that. Now I want to turn to statistical process control. How am I doing for time? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Oh, good. I'm good then. Okay. Statistical process control involves the use of statistics to understand changes in a process. Oftentimes, people are deceived where they think a population is a group of static things. Oftentimes, you can make a population be a process. The process of what's going on we can treat as a population. Okay? So this shows some of the eye candy of what you get from statistical process control. Okay, so we're going to analyze process data. You can talk, whoops, There we go. Enumerative statistics are what everyone knows from graduate school. Means, standard deviations, ANOVAs, discriminant analysis, that sort of stuff. That's one type of statistics. There's another whole area of statistics that's process statistics, and it deals with statistical process control. It was created by W. Edwards Deming. And he basically, when Japan was crushed, not by an earthquake, but by 2 atomic bombs, after World War II, he was in charge of bringing Japan's economy back to the fore. And they adopted his methods and rapidly became one of the most powerful economies in the world. So it comes from a business idea, but the basic premise is that in a process, there is going to be variation. Whenever you put a human in a process, there's going to be variation. And I would argue that sport training is a process where you start someplace, you go along over time, and you try to produce a product, which is sport performance, okay, or preparedness. So we don't get 100% consistency, or we don't lose variation with sport. We actually enhance it often. And remember I said that a lot of times the information is in the noise, because most of the time in enumerative statistics, they would look at the stuff I'm going to show you as things to be discarded under the term error. And what I'm going to tell you is that that's not necessarily error. That's oftentimes something that's very important. So, okay. One of the things that statistical process control does, probably its main function, is to determine when the process has deviated from normal. Okay, so it looks for outliers. Evidence of the fact that the process is veering out of control. All right, so it uses very simple statistics, by and large, to get started. Then the statistics can get a little heavy duty, but for coaches and whatnot, the statistics, all you need to know is mean and standard deviation. That's all you need to know. And lo and behold, Excel will do that for you without much trouble. Okay? So here's the basic idea. You have athletes going along in time, and let's just say this is time in 800 meters, let's say, for grins. So the athlete, flutters around. We calculate a mean every time we add new data, and we do a test trial for the 800 meters, whatever you pick. And then we're going along, and these are times, and then we see all of a sudden, whoa, what happened up here? Right? And we plot the standard deviation. So this is 2 standard deviations away from the mean. Okay, what happened here? He speeded up, right? Shorter times. What was going on? I don't know, but it might be time to investigate. Okay? And we have a good reason to investigate, because 2 standard deviations away from the mean, what is the probability of data ending up there? On either side, 2.5%. That's it. Something that rare demands explanation. You follow? And if you see that, you should go, holy smoke, this needs to be understood. So let's look a little further. Okay, you all know the normal curve, right? That's this guy right here, and this is the mean. One standard deviation, 2 standard deviations, 3 standard deviations, etc. And everyone's had that before, right? No one's killed over dead. I used an ugly word, statistics. So, are you starting to shake? Yeah, okay. I love statistics too, but I didn't at first, I have to admit. And once I understood it, I love it. But when I was going, what the hell? How do you get the right answer in this bloody thing? So anyhow, if you have athletes who are performing and you find that their performance as they go along shifts from somewhere in here, out here, or out here, there are levels of distance from the mean where you start to get concerned. Okay? And with this, you have reason to get concerned. Data can drive your concern, not just, I don't know, it's had a bad day. Right? Well, how many bad days does it take to have you be concerned? So if you have athletes that are in odd places along this curve, you should be concerned, and sometimes when you're out here, you should drive an investigation. Now, I would argue, even though I used it, the 2 standard deviations away from the mean is too strict. Okay, I would argue that probably 1.5-ish standard deviations is probably more appropriate to begin your investigation. Because if you got to wait for something that's only a 2.5% probability on either end of the curve, that's pretty damn rare, and you're probably going to miss some stuff. Okay? So, but I used it anyway. These variations come from common causes like random variation, the nature of human beings performing and all that. And then there are special causes which are non-random. Those are the things that you're looking for. Normal variations that you find. And we characterize those statistically. That's a normal variation. We're not going to worry about it. Okay? When the variations get outside that, we start to worry. So we would plot. This is called a control chart. We would plot their average and their bouncing around of performance. We would have a lower control limit, an upper control limit, usually in the neighborhood of 1 standard deviation, then 2 standard deviations, and then you start to nitpick and split hairs in the middle. Okay? If you find distributions that deviate from the normal path, this is the mean, you can find all kinds of different variations. And trust me on this, I'm not going to go into it, but there are incredibly neat methods of analyzing how people might deviate. And the statistical process control people, also called total quality management, you might have heard about that before, same process, same stats. They use to find deviations to change manufacturing processes, hiring, all kinds of stuff. Okay? So, and there are some very elegant statistics to help you with that, but I'm not going to go into that because I already took my chances, and I don't know where the AED is. Okay? So, for example, here's a rule. If you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points below the mean in a row, would that cause you concern? Even though they're not outside the 2 standard deviation limit, right? That would be a concern. So there are lots of rules like that in statistical process control. Oh, that's where I want to go. Okay, this is real data from gymnasts. we're looking at sleep disturbances. And in this case, the mean is right here. 1 standard deviation, 2 standard deviations. This is again from Utah. And you can see that there are some kids, or this particular kid is outside the realm of normal variation. And so that would probably cause me to go, well, you know, what's going on with your sleep? And perhaps seek counseling or whatever. This is one of my favorite slides. This is gymnastics again. Pre-practice heart rate and the sum of illness symptoms. Okay, so it just turns out that every time their heart rate, resting heart rate, goes above 95%, the upper control limit, they're also sick, except one, this one right here. But that's an odd one because they just returned from Christmas break. Okay, every one of their odd heart rate records corresponded to when they were sick. Okay, and if you're alert and you have pretty dense data, I can tell you when you're going to get sick even before you show symptoms. Okay, that's kind of a handy thing to have, because then you can prophylactically do Tamiflu or whatever. Okay, so now trend analysis. That was statistical process control. You can look for trends, right? That's another way of monitoring. I showed you this earlier with regard to injuries. This is autocorrelation. I'm not going to go into that because that's pretty fancy, but it's a pretty curve, and I thought I'd put it up there. Here at BYU, I used to work with Craig Poole in women's track and field. And Craig has gone off to USOC things, and I think he's retired now. But he was very kind and allowed me to do damn near anything I wanted with the women's track team. So we monitored jumping. We did a profile of jumps, a static jump, a counter movement jump, and a drop jump every week that we could. You know, sometimes schedules just wouldn't allow. Okay, so what we found was that over time, this is a whole season, over time, the squat jump and counter movement jumps rates of force development didn't really tell us anything. But for track and field, what did tell us something was the rates of force development in a drop jump. That seemed to be pretty nicely reflective of how their fitness was progressing. And for track and field, does that make sense? You know, sprinters, runners, jumpers, things like that. Rate of force development in a jump is probably more important than rate of force development in a slow jump. This is from the Olympic Training Center. We were monitoring weightlifters. This is a female. And every week we did a static jump on a force plate. And so this is the force time curves laid on top of each other. And we can see that in January, her curve was there, February here, late February here, March there. She was the only one who showed that pattern and the only one who was qualified and was sent to an international contest. Okay, the only one who was progressing properly. So if you have a force plate, do jumps. We did counter movement jumps for a long time, but they didn't really work well for weightlifters. So, you know, that a static jump was what they do more or less, and a counter movement jump didn't tell us anything. Okay, now then as far as other trends, there are lots of things you can do with fancy statistics for curve fitting, and I would recommend you get pretty fluent in that if you want to look at trends. But there are lots of different ways to do it, and the actual data here is this, the green guys. Okay, it shows the change in body mass. Whoops. Hello. The change in body mass from 1956, I think, through to about 2000, which is all the data I could find. Okay, so what it showed was that the common criticism of gymnasts being too lean, too skinny, too small, just not the case. It's dependent on time. Early on, that's true. Early on, they were, you know, kind of extraordinarily thin right in here, but they started out more womanly and then got more womanly later. So it was like it's self-corrected. Okay, so the things that physicians and other people like to use to pick on gymnasts just does not hold. Okay, that is all I have. I thought I'd take questions. How am I doing? Where am I? 5 minutes, okay. So I'll take questions, but before I do that, I think I'll go on to the next part because I have a little time. So now, in the future, what am I looking at as far as monitoring is concerned? I do thermal imaging, and I really would like to encourage people to get thermal cameras. This is a gymnast showing hot spots on both SI joints. Very common among gymnasts, and actually females in general. You know, you can type a skeleton forensically just by looking at their SI joint. This was a triathlete at the Olympic Training Center. She has a cold foot here compared to this foot. That's not okay. Okay, they should be equal. And what I found after puttering around is that she, well, actually I knew this beforehand, but she was having trouble. She got drop foot in the run, you know, like halfway through the Olympic marathon thing for triathlon, not an Ironman triathlon, but an Olympic triathlon. So she would get drop foot, and the athletic trainers, God bless them, did all their voodoo with their beads and rattles and crap like that for a year, and no progress. And so they asked me to come in. I was working with Dr. Reasoner then at the Olympic Training Center, and I was running the recovery center, so they asked me to come and take a look at her, which I did. We looked at her gait, we did high-speed video of her gait, and we did thermal, and I looked at thermal and I went, for crying out loud, no wonder she's got drop foot on the right side, there's something wrong. So then we did EMG of looking at perineals and whatnot, and I found the left side perineals were fine. You know, very obvious bursts, you know. On the right side, I would have to call it disorganized. You never saw that clear bursts on running, okay? So we did it again, make sure it wasn't an instrumentation problem. Then said, you know, she's got nerve involvement. Something's wrong. There's a nerve problem. And so then a high-powered surgeon who happened to be there doing his kiss the ring period for medical people in order to go to the Olympic Games, he volunteered to, you know, take her to Los Angeles, where they did a nerve conduction velocity test. And sure as heck, her right side perineals are all screwed up. And so then he did an MRI and found, oh, she's got a cyst. There's an impingement, a bony impingement that's, you know, crushing the nerve. And so he goes in and does surgery. She's back and running full thing in a couple of weeks. After a year of puttering around with ice and, you know, running in water and I don't know. I mean, things that would seem to me were probably done by the Romans for gladiators. Okay, another thing I'm interested in is GPS. GPS is pretty big time now with soccer and football and folks like that. So the principal problem that GPS faces is its slow update rate. Generally speaking, about the best you can get is 5 samples per second, except if you go to a different company and they are selling a 20 sample per second update rate. The Russians have had it for some time. For the GLONASS system they have, is kind of the counterpart to our GPS system. Their system has been doing 20 samples a second for basically ever, but they don't have as many satellites until just recently. This is using GPS to do terrain analysis. We have the Korea downhill course shown in GPS coordinates. So you can plot them in 3D and figure out what the course looks like. And I've got to tell you, you know, those of you who are instrumentation starved, this system I built myself, programmed myself. It's staggeringly easy, and the whole system cost about $70. And I can put a SD card in it and record all of the GPS stuff. In this case, at 2 samples a second. I've just gotten the 20 samples per second thing, and I haven't gotten it to work yet because I haven't had a chance to work on it. Then the same company is advertising a 50 sample per second GPS, which will completely change the playing field when it comes to GPS stuff. So those of you who are out doing outdoor stuff with Catapult and those kinds of things, just be aware that the 5 samples a second that they boast of has gotten buried by new technology. And you can buy it. You can buy it. You can have a GPS system that stores everything to a SD card for way less than $100. Per athlete, of course, but you know, that's a lot less than what you're paying in other systems. Okay? What I'm referring to here is using things called Arduinos, a Raspberry Pi or a BeagleBone. This is an Arduino. I've used it to do everything from collecting force data on friction in treadmills to heart rate. It has an EMG thing. Let's see if I have it there. No. But it does telemetry. This is EKG. This is force. This is temperature. So there are literally dozens of sensors that any moron could learn to program, because they come with tutorials, of what to do. It's sort of like C. The language is sort of like C. Very, very easy to learn. Okay, and it's this big. Fits in the palm of your hand. Right, and it has 7 analog to digital channels, and I think 10 digital channels. So plenty of room for collecting data. Here's the EMG. I just got one of these. It's a single channel. It has another little board that sticks to it that has the batteries. And you could put an XV transmitter on it, and you've got telemetered EMG, just like Naraxon. And you're not going to have to pay $60,000. This whole shooting match with batteries and everything else cost $50. Okay, this is a heart rate monitor interface for the Arduino. This takes strain gauges, 2 of them at a time. Here's a strain gauge you can get. This whole system, if you're measuring force, I think costs $60. Okay, whereas if you go to buy just a load cell, oftentimes varies that, because they're often $500 or more. And you can buy systems that do telemetry. This one just happens to be temperature. Okay, so if you need to know something in a remote place, it's already there. It's already built up. All you got to do is write a few lines of code. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. So, any questions? Assuming I have any time. Yeah, go ahead.
So with everybody kind of hopping on the monitoring bandwagon, it's definitely the buzzword in the industry with heart rate, HRV, body weight, hydration with 900 million variables. Where do you start? What are the easiest, most meaningful markers?
I would start with competition information, because that's just paper and pencil. Then I would add session RPE, because that's pretty easy, and if you don't know what it is, look it up. Then I would add, but I like to triangulate. I don't mind using psychological-like variables, but I would want to triangulate that with physiological variables as well. So I would go with heart rate. It's easily accessible, and so use that. After that, it's kind of a toss-up. People are trying to do a lot of things to separate you from your money, and if you look at wearable technology at this point, you're really hot if you want to keep track of steps, heart rate, and sleep time. After that, it gets pretty twitchy. So if you can start with those, they're easily available. The technology's there. It's not terribly expensive. You could do that. I would never buy one. I would build my own, because Arduino comes with accelerometers, with gyros, with the whole shoot match, all in one little board that's about as big as a quarter. Okay, so I'd build mine. I wouldn't spend the money on that stuff, because you can build it. It's not hard. After that, I would say, when I had the opportunity, I would stick with what I did with the dot sheets, because that took me 20 years almost of evolution to figure it out. Time to bed, time awake, sleep disturbances, mood states, injuries, and resting heart rate and illness. So those are what I would want to know. And then, of course, dosage, but you're already keeping track of that. Okay? Yeah, in Doha, there was a lot of discussion about the catapults and other systems. And the poor representative from Catapult there really got creamed, because people were not happy with the reliability of the thing. So build your own. Don't spend that much money. Okay. I can't believe there are no questions. Okay, I'll ask my standard question. How many of you now are going to go out and start monitoring if you haven't already? Oh, whoa, that is a breakthrough. Holy smoke. Okay. Yeah, a lot of times you just don't have the opportunity. But anyhow, all right. Well, thank you.